My dear readers, listeners, and of course friends, upon subjecting myself to the intellectual ordeal that is the latest Jordan Peterson podcast, I find myself once again astounded by the depths of vacuity and self-aggrandizement the man is capable of plumbing. In this dreary episode, Peterson has found a kindred spirit in Rob Henderson, an author whose recent memoir, Troubled, chronicles his journey from the foster care system to the hallowed halls of Yale and Cambridge. At first blush, Henderson's story might appear inspiring, a classic tale of triumphing over adversity through grit and determination. But a closer examination reveals a narrative riddled with logical fallacies and reductive thinking. Henderson's central thesis, insofar as one can be discerned amidst the fog of anecdote and pop psychology, appears to be that the primary impediment to upward mobility is not structural inequality or the depredations of late capitalism, but rather the erosion of the nuclear family and the proliferation of luxury beliefs among the coastal elite. This argument rests on a foundation of fallacious reasoning. Henderson and Peterson engage in a textbook example of the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, assuming that because family breakdown often precedes negative outcomes, it must be the sole or primary cause. They fail to grapple with the complex web of socio-economic factors that contribute to family instability, preferring instead to draw a simplistic causal arrow from divorce to delinquency. Moreover, the notion of luxury beliefs is a classic example of the strawman fallacy. Henderson and Peterson erect a caricature of progressive values as frivolous and decadent, ignoring the fact that many on the left are deeply concerned with issues of poverty and inequality. They also engage in a form of the no true Scotsman fallacy, implying that anyone who holds these beliefs cannot be authentically working class or disadvantaged. Throughout the conversation, Peterson and Henderson rely heavily on anecdotal evidence and sweeping generalizations. They extrapolate from Henderson's personal experience to make broad claims about the state of society, committing the fallacy of hasty generalization. They also engage in a form of the appeal to authority fallacy, using Henderson's Ivy League credentials as a shield against criticism of his ideas. Perhaps most galling is the way in which Henderson and Peterson weaponize the language of victimhood while simultaneously decrying it. They bemoan the alleged cancellation of Henderson by bookstores, ignoring the fact that an author who has been featured in major publications and boasts a substantial online following is hardly a marginalized figure. This is a textbook example of the persecution complex fallacy in which minor slights or challenges are blown out of proportion to paint oneself as a brave truth-teller. Perhaps the most egregious aspect of this intellectual farce is the way in which Peterson and Henderson fancy themselves brave iconoclasts, speaking truth to power in an era of suffocating political correctness. In reality, they are peddling a brand of reactionary populism that has a long and ignoble history. Their diatribes against cultural Marxism and postmodernism are merely the latest iterations of a paranoid style that has animated right-wing cranks for generations. Peterson's pseudo-profound ramblings about archetypes and mythology are particularly risible. He seems to believe that by invoking Jung and Campbell, he can lend an air of intellectual gravitas to what is essentially a rehashing of hoary self-help bromides. His tangents on Pinocchio and other cultural detritus serve only to highlight the paucity of his insights. It is a sad indictment of our culture that a man who can barely complete a coherent thought without lapsing into incoherent mysticism is hailed as a public intellectual. Henderson, for his part, seems content to bask in the reflected glow of Peterson's celebrity. He affects a pose of world-weary wisdom, as if his experience in the foster care system has granted him unique insights into the human condition. But scratch the surface of his musings, and one finds little more than a collection of anecdotes and platitudes. His critique of luxury beliefs is a particularly egregious example of the kind of faux populism that has become all too common on the right. In the end, this podcast offers little more than a rehash of reactionary talking points and pop psychology bromides. Peterson and Henderson's analysis is riddled with logical fallacies and lacks any substantive engagement with the complex realities of poverty, inequality, and social mobility. It is a testament to the intellectual bankruptcy of the IDW crowd that this sort of self-indulgent navel-gazing passes for heterodox thinking. One can only hope that future generations will look back on this era of public discourse with a mixture of bemusement and pity,